willpower. Some people believe it's the secret to health, happiness and success. So what are we really talking about? Historically, willpower has been defined along these sorts of lines, something like this. And last year we had Roy Burmaster, one of the leaders in this area, talk about self-discipline, exerting control. What does that really mean? What does it look like in our daily lives? Well, what it often means is resisting temptation, the sorts of things we face on a daily basis, each and every day. Oh, sorry, that's David Beckham, by the way. That's for those of you that find it hard to resist sport. What's it like to resist these things each and every day? Well, it's pretty exhausting, and there's no wonder why a lot of the research suggests that willpower is a limited resource. And this is what we find, and if I go back to my earlier career, my background's in clinical psychology, by the way, which meant I specialised in misery before I'd even heard of happiness. It's true. It's true. I did 3 degrees in psychology, and all I heard about was stress, depression, misery, where things went wrong in life. But what I also learned from clinical psychology, which is a very, very satisfying and fulfilling career, is that I saw a lot of people who in different ways were trying to resist the sorts of temptations, I suppose, and that I referred to earlier, and what they often felt like this. They often felt not good enough. They were often labelled as being unmotivated. This is something I saw a lot of in my earlier career. And yet I would look at these people, and I would look at what they were doing in other parts of their life, and it just constantly struck me that these people weren't necessarily unmotivated. They just weren't motivated to do the things that we thought they should be doing. And this is a common problem with children, I think. It's a common problem for all of us. We need to think about when we label someone as unmotivated, what are we really doing? Is it really just our expectations they should be doing A, B, C, when in fact they want to do X, Y, Z? If that's the case, it doesn't mean they're not motivated. As I said earlier, it just means they're motivated to do different things. And so I came up early on in my career with this belief. Now, that actually helped me in many different ways, because when I looked at clients, rather than thinking they were unmotivated, my goal became to find what their motivation was. And that's a fundamentally different way to look at someone, to approach someone, and to work with them as a therapist or as a coach or teacher or whatever area that you're working in. And it made it much easier and more positive for me, which meant I think I related to my clients better and I was able to help them. If I could help them find what their motivation was, then we were more likely to achieve something. And this is when I discovered this sort of great quote here. Fairly wise person, Albert Einstein: love is a better teacher than duty. So if we can find that inner motivation, which we all have somewhere or other within ourselves, might not know what it is, if we can find that love, that passion, we've heard a bit about that this morning as well, then we can use that for good. And if we can use that rather than fighting and resisting the temptations, which becomes exhausting, if we can use that power and that passion, we can achieve much more. And this is what I've developed now in this context here, is a new model for willpower. Something that's built on the principles of positive psychology, these sorts of things here, and I'm going to run through this briefly. But if we can put all of these conditions in place, then I believe, rather than finding ourselves exhausted by fighting and resisting temptations, we can actually become energized by pursuing what we love. And this is what it's all about. It's about moving towards something that's attractive, as opposed to moving away from something that's inherently unattractive, for whatever reason, for that person. This is what I want to talk to you about today, and I want to start with character. This is an old-fashioned term. It's not something that I learned about in my early career, but thankfully it's coming back into favour. It's coming back into fashion, largely due to many of the researchers in positive psychology. And it's a great, great term, and I think it's very, very important. And some of the critiques of positive psychology, which say that it's just some sort of happyology and it's all about happiness, have led in a way, thankfully, to this field, this study, because real happiness isn't just feeling good, it's doing good. And they're both important. Feeling good is important, pleasurable, positive emotions are important, but doing good is very, very important, just as, if not more important. And what that comes down to is knowing what's important, knowing what we value in life. And the second bit there is having the courage to pursue that. Now, I've got just a couple of very short videos that I want to show you today. They say that a picture tells 1,000 words. I think some of these short little videos I'm going to show might tell 1,000,000 words, and I think this sums it up better than any research I could show you.
A swing and a belt, left field, way back, touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
Alongside such unforgettable home runs, the setting for this one was a bit different. In a small town in the middle of Washington State, on a field inside a chain-linked fence, in a game fewer than 100 people saw. A home run memorable not for the distance it traveled, or the game it decided, but for the meaning it carried. The last Saturday in April, the second game of a softball doubleheader between Central Washington and Western Oregon.
Well, we were both neck and neck fighting for the conference championship.
As a senior, this was Sarah Tucholsky's last chance to win a championship. She'd never hit a home run before, not in college, not in her life.
At 5'2", I'm not very tall. I'm more a line drive hitter. I don't hit for power.
But in the top of the second inning, with 2 runners on the second pitch, that changed.
I hit that pitch and it just went.
And we're just cheering, and the runners are cheering us around the base to head home. And then I'm going, where's Sarah?
In her excitement, Tucholsky failed to touch first base, so she quickly turned back.
Her pivoting just didn't pivot with her. And I heard her kind of yell, and she just dropped to the ground, and I was like, oh no.
Just fell immediately and was in a lot of pain. Just, I tried to keep my legs straight, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't really keep still.
Tucholsky, with a torn ACL, crawled back to first base. She was a long way from reaching home plate and keeping her first and only home run.
When she got back to first base, she laid there and she hugged on to first base, and then at that time, I was staring at the base and I go, what on earth are we gonna do?
And I turned the umpire standing right next to me. I said, what is the ruling if I put somebody in for Sarah? He said, it'll be a 2-run single.
If anybody would have, on her team, would have helped Sarah, she would have been called out.
That was the problem. None of Tucholsky's teammates were allowed to touch her. That's when Central Washington's Mallory Holtman, a player with more home runs than any other in conference history, a player for the opposing team, spoke up.
I went to the home plate umpire and asked if we could pick her up and carry her, and he looked at me a little strange.
And the umpire went and said, yes, you can do that. I'm still standing there in shock. I said, thank you so much.
We asked her, is it okay if we pick you up and carry you around the bases? And I say yes, and and say thank you. And she says, you hit the ball over the fence, you deserve it.
For that reason only, because she deserved it, Holtman and Liz Wallace began to carry the injured Tucholsky, stopping to touch her left foot on each base as the 3 made their way around the diamond.
We actually started laughing because we were just wondering what this would look like to all the people in the stands.
When I looked up, I didn't see, giant smiles and screams. I saw emotion and tears and people crying.
It's a great moment when someone has character to step up and do the right thing at the right time.
It's emotional.
It's a great moment when someone has the character to step up and do the right thing at the right time. This, I think, is the first piece of the puzzle to sorry for those of you, I should have said to get your tissues ready beforehand. This is the first piece of the puzzle, because if we know what's right and we have the courage to do what's right, we don't need willpower. It becomes irrelevant. In fact, the right thing to do becomes effectively the only thing to do. The second piece of the puzzle, however, is using our strengths. I'm not talking about physical strength here, using our inner strengths, our core strengths. This is a big part of positive psychology, to do what's right. The unfortunate reality is that too many people spend too much of their time trying to fix all of their weaknesses. Unfortunately, in our school system, too much of the time is focused on where kids are going wrong, and we forget that they're going right in so many areas as well. If we can identify what our strengths are, help our kids identify where their strengths lie, and encourage them and invite them and guide them to use those strengths to do what's right, then we start to get some momentum. Then we start to get, again, a situation where willpower, I think, effectively becomes irrelevant. The other thing to keep in mind is to actually stop and think for a minute about when we make our best decisions. This is a big part of the willpower research, is about making the right choices at the right time. An area where this has been focused on a lot is in dieting or weight loss, or if we look at any sort of behaviour change area. Should I go to the gym today? Those sorts of decisions are crucial. Should I eat that cupcake, or should I have the salad bowl, or whatever? So when we need to think about those decisions, or when we think about those decisions, we need to think, when are we in the condition, when are we most likely to choose the right sort of thing? And I guess I ask you now, are these the sorts of conditions under which you're more likely to make positive decisions? I'll ask for a show of hands. Who thinks yes? Now, well, clearly not. And yet, how many of us spend much of our lives like this, sick and tired and exhausted and busy and rushing, and to-do lists that are way too long, we're never going to get through them all. Whereas, how many of us think we're more likely to make better decisions when we're like this, when we're rested, when we feel refreshed, when we've been meditating regularly, exercising regularly? Too many of us spend too much of our time down the left-hand side, not enough down the right-hand side. But if we could, and if we can help our children and students to spend more of their time being fit and healthy and rested, then again, we're more likely to make better decisions. And then one of the other final things to keep in mind is that we don't have to do this all on our own. We just heard a fantastic story from Matt Cowdery on a number of levels, but one of the things that stood out for me was the support of his parents. Now, if you're lucky enough to have great supportive parents, that's fantastic. But if you don't, we can all create positive social networks in our life. And we know that those people that have good social support in their lives, good social networks, social connectedness, tend to be happier, more successful, healthier, more resilient, etc., etc. Too often we think it's all up to me. And when it comes to willpower particularly, we think of it as a very individual thing. I'm the one that's got to be strong. And yet all the research suggests something otherwise. People that make the best decisions tend to be surrounded by other people who make good decisions. So be careful who you hang out with, because behaviours and emotions are contagious. We know this for a fact. There's bucket loads of research from the social psychology research that suggests, so it's called social and emotional contagion. Happiness is catchy, misery can be catchy as well. But if we spend our time with the right sort of people who are engaging in the right sorts of behaviours and who are going to encourage us and support us, then we're far more likely to be successful. And again, I've got a short video that I think sums this up. Just watch this carefully.
Return of the Mac. Once again, return of the Mac.
goodness. I travel quite a bit to do this sort of speaking at conferences, and I'm still waiting for my wife to organise that when I get home, but hasn't happened yet, even when I walk in at home at the end of the day. But look, what was amazing about that is the musical ability, and not one instrument was played, but that's not the reason I showed it. The reason I showed that is that if you were watching carefully, you would have seen the positivity spread to the people, even on the periphery, the people that weren't even directly involved or even directly being sung to. And this is an illustration of what we call social and emotional contagion. The positivity spread. We can use that to our advantage. So if you want to exercise more, for example, hang out with people who exercise. If you want to eat better, don't hang out with people that go to McDonald's or eat crap all the time. We can use that to our advantage. We can surround ourselves with positive, enthusiastic, healthy, whatever sorts of people, and as a result, we will benefit. So this is a really, really important message, that we don't have to do it on our own. The final point I want to make, and really just to sum all of this up, is that I actually believe, although the title of this presentation is about willpower, I actually believe willpower is not necessarily the most effective way to go. I think we've got to stop fighting. We've got to stop fighting temptations, because we know from other research, we know from the worry and anxiety research, for example, the more you resist something, the more it persists. It comes back. It comes back. If you try to push worries away, they'll come back. If you try to fight cupcakes, they're strong. They'll get you in the end. So rather than resisting what's bad, if we can focus more on what's good, what's desirable, what's attractive, what we really want, that's a much easier way to go. And again, rather than being exhausted, we get energized. When we use our strengths, for example, we experience what's a positive psychologist called flow. That's an energizing state to be in. It's a state that's associated with health and well-being, not exhaustion and fatigue. So this other great quote, I think, sums up, is probably the final message that I want to give you. And another wise man, this should be, everyone in this room, our primary goal. If we can help us, all of ourselves and our children, not just understand what's right, but find pleasure. Finding pleasure in what's right, that would be an amazing outcome. So again, I'm going to argue we don't need power. This wise man sums it up better than I could.
Mithrandir, why the halfling?
I do not know. Saruman believes that it is only a great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. Simple acts of kindness and love. Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps it is because I'm afraid. It gives me courage.
Courage for all of us can come from doing simple acts, simple deeds each and every day. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.